I've been asked by Kathleen to moderate this panel, and this panel is, where are we? Creating the future of the high end, and basically looking to see how the audiophile community, manufacturers, as well as attendees, to increase the diversity and bringing in newer, different people to what we enjoy doing. I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Thomas. I'm currently with Bowers & Wilkins. I've also, in the past, I've worked for AudioQuest. I was their VP of sales for a few years. ELAC, Andrew and I worked together. That was a chore. And also worked for Sumiko for a while. I was raised in the hi-fi industry. So my first job in hi-fi, I was 2 weeks old, and I was in a commercial for Hi-Fi Buys for their store opening. So when people have asked me, how long have you been in the industry? I've been in the industry for 45 years, so.
Wait, you're 40?
I'm 45. I'm elderly. I'm elderly. That's me.
I'm Andrew Jones. I can see that from the title of this seminar, we've already failed to increase the diversity. So there we go. I think we should just go home now. So I'm currently that sounds so finite, doesn't it? I'm with ELAC, ELAC Americas, and formerly with TAD, Pioneer, Infinity, and KEF.
I'm Adrienne Alterman. I, like Kathleen, grew up in the hi-fi industry. My dad has a store down in New Orleans, and my brother has a store here in Denver. So very tied into retailers. I started off working for Listen Up, which is a Denver local company, and then worked for Sumiko as their regional manager for many years. I worked for Westone, which is a headphone company based in Colorado Springs, Bowers & Wilkins, and now I'm with YG Acoustics.
As you can tell, it's kind of all over.
Right.
It's one big family.
We can't hold a job is what she's trying to say.
Exactly. We can't hold a job.
Yeah. And I guess I should have prefaced, I'm managing editor with Positive Feedback. And my partner in crime, Carol Clark, is the other managing editor in Positive Feedback. So we have some talking points, but basically what we're going to do is share some ideas, concerns, observations about what we've seen, and then open it up to questions from the audience, the last 15 minutes or so. So who would like to start with what's wrong?
What's wrong with all you people?
I can add that just yesterday in visiting two rooms, Carol and I personally came across comments by the exhibitors that I felt was like, yeah, this doesn't necessarily open the doors to people who are looking for something or coming from a different place. In one instance, it was, could you play this song, this album that you like very much, on Tidal? No, we don't have Tidal here. But they did. But they didn't want to let anybody know because they didn't want people requesting things. And I get that. You know, they have a set list. They want to show off what they feel is best. And obviously, if they're playing the typical audiophile demo music and someone comes in and says, can you play this thrash metal for me? They're going to be like, well, you know, everybody's going to leave, and then can we wait, and so on. But they played something that we liked, and afterwards I said, what did you think? And everybody else was just simply blown away by it, and the exhibitor said, it's not anything I'd ever really want to play. And I'm kind of like, well, gee, okay, I'll write that up. Along with that, we were in another room and, showing off these speakers, and the comment was, yeah, the ones that women really like are in another room. And I'm kind of like, yeah, but I know you. We're friends. And you know my wife, Carol, and, she's actually the editor, and she's going to make sure all the content's the way it should be. And it's those types of things. I just feel like wife acceptance factor, somewhat narrow-minded as far as what music we can play and not play. I was sharing with Andrew at breakfast this morning that it'd be great if hours are set aside in the show. The last 2 hours of the day, he's tired of playing stuff. Last 2 hours of the day, everybody can play whatever they want. Go in any room, we'll play whatever you want. Bring it in, we'll play it. it opens the door for people to get a greater diversity as opposed to just, will you play Hotel California for me? I've never heard that before. You know, I have this 17 remasters, this is the latest version, and I've just got to hear it now on cassette. So anyways, that kind of opens the conversation. On to you guys.
I'll start.
Please do.
So is my
And I should add that part of this is also what they're doing as manufacturers,
Yeah.
exhibitors, dealers, sales, marketing, that what they can do as a company to open that up and reach a wider audience.
So first of all, I want to say, so when I was actually asked to do this panel, it was before I worked for Bowers and Wilkins, and now I work. So this isn't Bowers information or anything like that. This is just some stuff I gathered up. But you know, one of the things I think that gets missed is I think there's a big opportunity in terms of a younger generation, and how do we engage them? How do we talk to them? I think there's, you know, people like to talk about millennials a lot. Does everybody know, like, millennials are not kids? Like, they're actually like 40-year-old people. So these are people that, you know, with young families and things like that. And also, how do we talk to kids? You know, I have a 11-year-old and a 14-year-old, and you know, one of the things that's really remarkable is they are highly, highly engaged in music, but they're not engaged in a way that we're engaged. You know, they don't sit there and listen to a pair of speakers. They're listening to the headphones, you know, on their phone. You know, here they're listening to YouTube. YouTube is a huge, huge source for music, huge source for reviews, and even people you don't think of being tapped into millennials, like, you know, Steve Gutenberg is very, very tapped into, you know, via CNET, you know, that group, you know, through YouTube. And I'm always shocked that we don't advertise more through YouTube. I was actually with my kids at a show, because I like to take my kids to shows, even though they're pretty young. And it was an artist in Seattle named Dodie, and she actually got her start on YouTube. She's a singer-songwriter. So not like what most people would think of us as like what kids would listen to. You most of us think it's like cheesy pop music. This is actually like serious singer-songwriter music. She's young, got started on YouTube. Her concert, I was expecting it to be like, okay, she's on YouTube, right? The line was literally wrapped around the block more than once going into this place. It was insane, especially because most of the kids were, you know, under 21. So like the over 21 section was empty, which was awesome for me. And then the kids are like crammed in down to the under 21 section. And it was an amazing show. And it's like, why aren't we looking to those artists, especially like headphone companies and things like that, to sponsor artists like that? She has 1.6 million followers on YouTube. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. And then I think there's also a lot of misconception in terms of how younger people and women are engaged in music. You know, this is actually some statistics about paid streaming services. And yes, it's feeble, and we wish more people would pay for their music. But it is interesting to see that the male-female discrepancy, it's only about, you know, was it like 6 points? You know, it's not that far off in terms of the women that are paying for streaming services versus the men. So women are highly engaged in music. And also, I'm pretty impressed with the number of, you know, people in their teenagers and into their 30s that are paying for streaming services. So, you know, these people are engaged in music. And then I was actually I am a girl, I don't know if anybody noticed. So I was at the makeup store called Ulta, and this was the display. So people that are not in our industry are seeing that women are engaged in audio, and this is a cool thing for kids and younger people, particularly girls. And they're actually marketing makeup using hi-fi. And yet we kind of perceive in our part of the industry that women and younger people are not interested. So I think a lot of it is how do we kind of bridge that gap? And so that was this is kind of what piqued my interest in terms of this is something we should really be talking about, because people outside our business is seeing it, but we're not necessarily seeing it inside.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that, like Dave said, the conversation about music selection, because, yeah, we tend to have set lists that we want to use to show off the equipment, but also I've mentioned a lot of times we'll ask people if they want to play stuff, and it can clear the room, right? So that's the trepidation you have when you're doing that. But on the other hand, if you don't let people play some new types of music, then you don't learn about new kinds of music, and those people are turned off, and you've lost potential sales or something. And even if it doesn't sound good to us, if it's their reference, then at least they get to be able to evaluate on their terms what things sound like. And you can always turn it around afterwards. You can say, well, suppose it was a style of music and maybe not a great recording of it. You say, well, if you'd like that, maybe you'd like this one. And so then you can play something closer to their category that you think sounds good and keeps your audience engaged. So the idea of having a free-for-all at the end of the day, I think is a great idea. You know, that everybody.
Do a great job of having good diversity of music.
Well, I try, but I wouldn't say I'm as contemporary or current as maybe I should be. But then that's partly because we still haven't. It's this chicken and egg. If we're not getting people who are interested in that kind of music coming along, then you're not going to try and tailor the music that you play for that audience. But I also think it's more a problem here in the States than it is in Europe, because you do shows in Europe and they're much more family oriented. You know, we're talking about, you know, getting kids or women in, but it's actually families. It's families that you need to be coming along. And, you know, shows, and Montreal is also like that. Shows that are located in the right area, are free, and advertise in the right way, and have some attractions that might interest people so that they can give it a chance. They're passing by and they go, oh, I'll drop in and see what this is about. We just, you know, we're locked into what we've always done. And so that means we also, as companies, as manufacturers, we need to be employing a lot more younger people within the design teams, within the marketing, so they are current with what people are doing. There's so much we can do that we just don't.
Yeah, adding to your remarks, Andrew, I think that one of the biggest issues I see is that we're not meeting anyone where they are. And what I mean by that is, if we're looking for women, Pinterest is like 98% used, but I actually don't know that statistic, so don't quote me on that. But all my,
I think it's 98.4.
so, yeah, you're right. You know, that's where they're looking. I mean, women spend hours just scrolling through Pinterest and creating boards. I mean, how many manufacturers or hobbyists have ever created a board on Pinterest for pictures of hi-fi gear? I mean, a show like this is a perfect opportunity to populate something like that and share it on social media. You know, I currently live in San Francisco. When I was working with Bowers & Wilkins, working with a bunch of the young engineers over there, and these guys all go to EDM concerts, you know, and I have never once heard an EDM track played at a hi-fi show. Oh,
Andrew
did you do it?
He,
I do.
He has one. He has one that
Okay, I'm going to his room later.
Dry every show.
I have to start by apologizing for it, apparently.
Yes.
But, well, you know, I think that one of the things Bowers & Wilkins, when they launched their PX last year, the amazing thing that I saw, I'm on Snapchat. I don't know how many people have ever downloaded that app, but I saw an ad for a Bowers & Wilkins PX on Snapchat, and I was like, this is amazing. I'm so proud of Bowers & Wilkins. So I think that as a community, we really need to embrace the changes that have happened in the world, and we're hard-headed when it comes to that, because our gear and the love of the things that we are very passionate about are very, I don't want to say antiquated because that sounds bad, but it's true. You know, vinyl hasn't changed since the 70s as far as how it works, and that's just part of our nature as an industry. But what we need to wrap our heads around is that the world has changed a lot in the last 10 years. And even from when I started working for Listen Up, the year I graduated college in 2007, and that since then smartphones have come out. DACs were like not even a part of the language of our community. I remember Sonos being a fight to get consumers to understand how to stream music, but not only consumers, the sales staff and stores to really get behind that. And that's just one example of how things have changed so much over the years. And a lot of times in these rooms here in the hotel, you'll find people that are very committed to playing their CDs. And there are 2 generations of people in existence that have never even owned a CD. And so when you think about it from that perspective, we've got to embrace what we're doing as a community, and that means consumers sharing it with whoever you can, the people in this audience sharing what your love is, but us as manufacturers and also reviewers and magazines working together to figure this out to get to people in a different way than we have been and meeting them where they are, and realizing that there's a lot of change out there. So.
Something interesting to say there about the way that they listen to music. Like I've had people come in and say, well, can I plug my iPhone or my phone into the system so I can play some of the music that's on there? And no, I didn't even think of making that a possibility. We have this idea of what hi-fi and sound reproduction should be. And we get locked into, well, we're going to try and find people to join us listening that way. But maybe we ought to think about differently. We'll eventually get them to listen to that way. But meanwhile, we ought to be designing product for them to listen their way and then go through an education process. So at least you've captured them, you've got brand loyalty, for example, and then start to educate them. But if we just try and say, no, this is the way you should be doing it, then we're going to lose them.
I came across a Facebook forum, forums are always interesting in a few ways. And it was an LP enthusiast Facebook forum. And right there in bold was no Crosleys. And it's like, okay, I get it. I get it that, yes, they damage your records. None of us would ever in this room own one. But, Urban Outfitters is the largest brick and mortar seller of vinyl in the country.
I think they're in the world.
In the world, maybe?
They have over 460
Well, you made up that other
stores.
Pinterest.
No, I did know that one. Last I checked.
Our world.
And they're
Our world, the world.
And I heard, and this goes in the Adrienne category of unsubstantiated statistics, but they're the largest seller of turntables also.
Yes.
And most of those are Crosleys. Some of them are Projects and things like that. But the thing is that this is an enthusiast, LP enthusiast, and we're basically saying, you know what? If you're new to this and you don't know, you're not welcome. Whereas instead, these should be exactly the people we're welcoming in, and then not being jerks to them that they have a Crosley, but saying, that's awesome that you're interested in this. It's awesome that you're listening to music. It's awesome that you bought a turntable. You know what? If you have any questions about how to do this better, we're here for you. And be more supportive and have a more mentor-like environment to people that are enthusiastic about wanting to come in, instead of putting up barriers and basically telling people they're not welcome. We do a really good job of kind of being this little clique and not letting people into our club. And we need,
We're very snobby.
we are.
We're snobs.
And, I think, it's time to kind of open that up and welcome more people into the club. I did also, one of the things that's interesting to me is I think that marketing teams, like the previous slide I showed, they're starting to kind of see that, and I've seen some pretty drastic changes in terms of how companies have started marketing, particularly on Instagram, because it does tend to skew a little bit younger. This is Moon Sim Audio. And this is, I totally used to make fun of them because they're good friends, how they advertised. But they used to have very, very gear focused, like here's a piece of gear. Here are all the awards we've won. buy our things. And instead, they've really kind of gone more to, hey, this is how awesome your life can be if you have a cool piece of moon gear. And Bowers and Wilkins did the same thing. The left is from their 700 series launch of last year. The right is the 600 series launch that just happened. And just really drastically changing from a traditional lifestyle shot of, okay, yes, it's in a living room, to, hey, a couple dancing. This is why we love music. That's how good they are. They don't even need to be plugged in. One company that has done a great job of this from the very beginning has been Sonos. A lot of us kind of like to rag on Sonos, but the thing is, they have really expanded the market in terms of people listening to music in their home. They did an amazing study. I don't know if anybody read it, but they did an amazing study in conjunction with Apple just about how music enhances people's lives and how it can enhance your relationships with your family, your spouse, and all these things. And they really incorporated it into their marketing. So I love the statistic that 81% of people know who their partner's favorite song is. That's just cool, right? That's just a great way to bring people together. Having a bunch of women saying the soundtrack of your night. Just kind of really having it be about music and how music enhances our life, and the gear is how we get the music, instead of gear. So.
I think that one of the aspects about being snobbish, or perceived as being snobbish, is reaction to where product is sold. So I had speakers selling through Best Buy. I'm now in Magnolia. Magnolia is a better store than Best Buy in terms of being able to hear something, a reasonable expectation, hopefully, of being able to understand what the product can be. But I've started going around and seeing how difficult it is for those stores to guarantee things are set up in the right way to give a good demonstration. So you have to address that. But we always talk about, oh God, Best Buy, they don't know anything. Why would any of us ever buy anything from Best Buy? Well, that's kind of, so let's fix that rather than discounting that, because they're going to reach that audience of people interested in music and buying equipment for the first time. They're going to reach that audience way better than any of us do with the regular type of higher end stores, where people just aren't going to come in, or we don't have product at low enough prices for them to afford to get on that ladder of upgrading. And so it's surprising when you go into the stores, some of the enthusiasm level that those blue shirts have. And so we want to reach them and educate them so they can do a better job of selling to those people. We'll reach a much larger audience that way. So it gets back to this, don't be a clique, just instead of discounting, say, well, why do you do it like that? Or why do you not buy this stuff? And address those issues with them.
Yeah, I think touching on your point there, as manufacturers, we want our product to be presented in the best experience possible for anyone. But we go a little crazy about it. These shows notwithstanding, we literally tweak and spend hours setting things up, discussing the room, talking about cables. And for anyone who's not an enthusiast, that's really scary. And also, we do ourselves a disservice by expecting, by trying to stay out of retailers who can't give that perfect experience. And we almost isolate ourselves because of that. Mm-hmm. But it is an important part of the process, I think, in the buying, because if you look at millennials, I am a millennial, we're looking for two things. We want authenticity and we want experience. And that's why, coffee shops, when you walk into a coffee shop and it's full of a bunch of hipsters and maybe some records playing in the vinyl, they're looking for an experience. And the way that they're traveling the world and the way that they are, working from home in a totally different way, all these things are about the life experience. And so we've got it right in the intent, But the extent that we kind of take it to the crazy, I think needs to be dialed back in order to bring more and more people into our industry.
Right. I would add that obviously where you advertise is important. If you're just advertising in the audio press, you're just preaching to the choir. You're not reaching anybody new. I'd love to see if you walked into there's so many breweries now with tasting rooms. Why not have
You'd
little
know all
ELAC.
about that, wouldn't you?
a little ELAC store in there with a Sprout or something, and inexpensive VPI turntable, and it'd be so easy that they could just carry certain brands, and not necessarily sell it, but also then point people in a direction where they could find this. Yeah, my son works at a bottle shop. He's a millennial. His big thing is to go out in our main listening room and put on a record and sit there and listen to stuff. Not typical for a 30-year-old. But in his shop where he works, they spin vinyl all day long. And that's on a great system. I helped put together, but, and it's an exposure. People come in and they play vinyl and they can bring in records and sit there and have a great beer and listen to music and share music, and it opens up things. And it's now reaching outside of us, outside of just this community.
Yeah, it's like with Kathleen's comment about Urban Outfitters being one of the largest retailers of vinyl and maybe turntables.
Right.
The difficulty of going outside of the industry for advertising is engaging the people from the advert. Because if they're not looking for an interest in audio, they might just flip past an advert like that. So like you say, it's how do you engage them when you go outside?
Yeah, it becomes the lifestyle picture. It becomes something that, not just a speaker, not just a turntable.
Yeah.
Or, they're not really reading a lot of magazines. It becomes sponsoring somebody like that artist Dodie or something like that on YouTube, getting her a pair of headphones and having her talk about how she mixed, because a lot of these artists mix stuff at home, how they mixed it on this pair of headphones. Things like that, and really kind of going to where the content that these people are viewing are. And I think the Pinterest idea is really, really good.
What a great example of one of the things we're all kind of touching on was there was an ad at a local brewery here in Denver, and my brother and I brought some of our records because they had an ad for come drink beer, and for an hour we're going to spend vinyl. And we ended up going to the brewery, and we've got pretty nice vinyl, and could hear the turntable not sounding that well, and went over, and the needle was like literally not at the correct angle. And I remember both of us kind of biting our tongue because we didn't want to yell at the guy like, you're going to damage the vinyl. But that's a great example of how it's a good effort, but then taking it and not being negative about the situation and educating people about, I think, pretty sure he went and got a replacement needle, and that guy ended up being a customer. But
I mean, I guess I start off very snobbish with hi-fi because at school we were asked once, it was a class project, bring in your favorite record and play it to the class and show them what music you like. And I thought, I'm not playing my record on the school record player. I didn't have a car. I got about half a dozen of my friends, and we carried through the streets, 2 miles through the street. One guy carries one speaker, another carries another speaker. We literally brought in the hi-fi system so we could play our music in the right way. I guess I started being snobbish when I was young. Yeah.
you are so cute.
And it was Carpenters. Everyone was playing Cream and Yes and Genesis, and I played Carpenters.
To add to what Andrew's saying, my wife and I are both retired school teachers. And at a Rocky Mountain about, 10 years ago, I was talking to Sean in the zoo room, and he's like, wait, so your school's focusing on the arts? I said, yeah. He goes, I'm going to send you a primed pair of the Super Soulflies with no drivers in them, and I want the kids to finish them for me.
Oh, I remember that, yeah.
And we'll ship them, and we'll ship them back. I'm like, oh, sweet. So then we were walking around talking to other people. I'm like, so what am I going to do with a pair of speakers? I got nothing else. And Bel Canto's like, we're going to send you an integrator. And then Nordos is like, we're going to give you all the cables you need. Tell us what you need. And so for the last 6 years of my career, I had this amazing audio system in my classroom. And the kids would like, what can we play? Like, you can play anything you want as long as it doesn't have the words that you know you shouldn't have. They were sixth graders. So, but it was amazing. And, the kids did a checkerboard finish on it. And Sean sent them back, got them back. He made custom all black drivers for it. And then he took photographs of them and put them up on his website. His phone started ringing off the next day from his dealers. You didn't tell us you had that finish. We want to order that finish. That's amazing. And he's like, yeah, well, you'd have to talk to these sixth graders in California, and maybe they go into business for you. So it's that kind of thing. I don't know how hard it is for maybe, a company to pick a high school and say, we're going to put together something for that high school. And it's marketing, it's advertising, or college for all that matters. Because in the end, are we really reaching them and getting them in some way?
Yeah.
And it was fun.
I've given my nephews at college, I gave him a hi-fi system. And he thinks I'm being a very nice uncle to give him a hi-fi system. I'm giving him, so hopefully some of his friends will go, oh, that's cool, where did you get that? And
You
can
got
I get
business
one?
cards too.
Yeah.
Yes, it comes with like a business card. One thing too, I think you were talking a lot about getting people into stores and getting people into events like this. I think once they come in the store too, I think retailers also need to kind of focus on who's coming in, and I think the retailers that have been very successful in the past few years have vinyl in the stores. It brings a different demographic in. It brings people back over and over again, which is great. I think also actually acknowledging the customers when they come in the store. I think there's a lot of discounting of women, in particular when they come in the store, as well as younger people. I was actually at an event for a buying group, and it was a seminar basically talking about how to sell to women, which are always my favorite ones. I have very strong opinions about this, as you can imagine. And they were talking about how, you need to have your showroom be more like a home and softer finishes and very simplified systems and things like that. And I'm like, and I raised my hand. And they're like, oh, what do you think? I'm like, well, I have an idea. It's kind of radical. But what if you have a female customer come in the store, and this would apply for a younger person too, and you ask them a series of questions. I don't know, maybe we'll call it qualifying questions. And based on the answers to those questions, you determine what their needs are, like you would a regular customer. And they were like, because you never know that person's experience. Now, maybe 80% of the women that come in the store really don't care, and they just got dragged in. But you know what? I know if I come in a store, I care. I know if you go in a store, you care. And I know there's lots of women that I've seen here that they care. And one of the cool things, so there's a lot of stuff you see, and I'll kind of skip ahead. One of the things that we see a lot of online is people will make this remark, why aren't there any female audiophiles, right? I'm sure you've seen people ask this question before. And then there's a group of us that are female audiophiles that are on these Facebook pages and stuff that'll go, I'm here, you know me. Like we've met before, we've had dinner, I'm here. And then, another one will come up, well, I'm here too, yeah, you know me. And then, a bunch of us will say this, and then the remark will be, well, you're different. You're a unicorn. And, we started, a group of us started thinking, wow, there's a lot of unicorns, a lot more unicorns than we thought. And one of the cool things, you may see this around a few places. Marjorie actually made these up for us. So basically just say, we exist, unicorns exist, Please stop asking where are the women audiophiles, because we're here. And the more that question gets asked, it makes us feel more other. You know, things like wife acceptance factor, things like pictures on Facebook, on Facebook forums of scantily clad women that have nothing to do about audio and audio forums. Kind of like when you have a woman or a younger person that's curious, they're going to go on there and see that, and they're like, oh, I guess this isn't where I belong. And
Yeah.
they're going to leave.
To agree with Kathleen, I think that one of the things we need to talk about as a community or recognize as a community is social interactions and what is appropriate to say versus not. There are so many examples of situations where I'm in this industry because I was, for many reasons, very passionate about hi-fi, but I also was born into it and started being indoctrinated when I was very young. And sometimes I've tried to left and got pulled back in. But for anybody who maybe wants to come work here in marketing or as a salesperson or maybe wants to come to a show like this, half of the comments that have been out, something that might scare people away is comments that are just not fun to be around. A lot of the examples that Kathleen gave. So social interactions on forums, on Facebook, advertisements that you see from some manufacturers, all of these things are, again, can be very off-putting for anybody who's not, say, exactly one demographic that we cater to.
And the thing is, it's not just, so I actually have an example up here that's just not one of my favorite examples. It's one of the more painful ones that I experienced, it was on a forum, and I blacked out the names, but there was a young couple. So he was like in his 30s. I actually asked him, what his demographic was. I messaged him as this went on. But he posted on it was like a, beginners and audiophile on a budget type Facebook forum. And he posted a picture of his system and basically was asking for help because his wife didn't like the stands that the speakers were on. And what should he do? The very first comment was, you should divorce your wife. The very next comment was, get rid of her. I posted, hey, this is actually a really great opportunity. Why don't you show her some pictures online of some different things, see what she likes the look of, take her to your local store and have her listen to a few things and see it in person, and you may actually you're probably going to end up with a pair of towers if her main objection is the stands. And you're probably going to get a much better pair of speakers than you ever thought you were going to be allowed to buy. And he was like, that's a great idea. The next comment, why don't you get a pair, this is awful. Why don't you get a pair of in-walls? And then why don't you put your wife in the wall? How would I get her in there? She would have to be really thin. What about a dehydrator? And the guy starts replying, I love my wife. He's basically like pleading, like, please stop. And he actually ended up leaving that forum. So it's not just women that are being turned away. It's a lot of people. They're just like, no, I actually like my wife. We're partners in this, and it ends up, I think we just need to be kinder and more mentoring and welcoming to people. That's my soapbox.
That's fine. and it's a really great comment, and what Kathleen's saying in perspective, because I was sharing this with a couple of attendees. Oh, you're on a panel. What is it? And I'm telling them that, and they're like, why do we care? They didn't really. Well, I don't understand why we need women or younger people here. Just find the way it is. And I'm kind of like, well, yeah, but you're only going to be around about another 10, 15, 20 years buying stuff. And I know the manufacturers would like to see their business
My
continue.
kids like eating.
So while it's okay for you, you should be looking at the bigger picture. It's kind of like, to me, it's an unhealthy attitude. And I don't know, you can't necessarily fix them. That's just who they are. But I think there's things we can do to start, a different flow of change.
Yeah, I mean, also, it gets back to recognizing what their needs are. So you say the question started with the stand, so why not show them stands? It's also when you go and look at how people are using equipment, and you look at some of the placement or this and that, and people say, well, it can never sound good like that. You've got to pull it out in the room, do this and the other. You were talking about us being meticulous about setup, and then realizing most people are not or can't in their environment. So you almost have to design for that. One of the changes I made in one of my products was realizing that, no, we've not always got them on stands, towed in towards the listener. They're going to be flat up against the wall facing out. Okay, so recognize that. Instead of trying to say, no, it'll never sound good if you do this, we'll try and make it sound better in that situation than it would have before. It's very instructive looking at the pictures on these forums that sometimes people do post, and seeing how people actually use things. And working with that rather than working against them. This idea of working against, it's just not going to work.
Right.
Yeah.
As a publisher, I was able to work with Kathleen and Andrew putting together a system for friends of ours who are into music. He's a musician, but they're not into audio. And so it was all new to them. And so we were able to put together a subwoofer, I think the B6s and the little integrated. And they're just sitting on IKEA stands, little things, and they wrote about it from the point of view of, we don't really know audio. Here's a learning curve. This is new to us. Yeah. And it's actually one of our most popular articles written on the site. And it just took off, and we've gotten so much positive feedback, no pun intended. But it was just, and it's wonderful. And I look at that like, okay, obviously the audiophile writers are going to write about stuff. You connect with them. They've got all this experience. But what about the people who are just brand new to this, and letting them explore something and get a system and understand, and all of a sudden they're like, wow, this is great. And I know Lance plays probably more music now than ever before. And if he came to a show, you did meet him once. He came in your room. He's a hardcore Melvins fan, so if you know who the Melvins are. And literally that's what he plays. And he's like, oh, the Melvins, it's melting my face right now with that subwoofer. The neighbors are complaining. But he's the happiest guy ever. And I looked at that and like, all right, this system's about $1,100. It's not outrageous. $1,100 is still $1,100. It's, for a lot of people, that's a lot of money. But they were just amazed. And now they're smitten.
Yeah. I did have one experience where I felt I had to kind of guide them on setup rather than leaving it alone. Because I went into my wife's friend's home. And there's music playing, and we walk in. And as I usually do, I'm looking around, well, I wonder what system was playing. And I couldn't see where the speakers were. And my wife's going, stop it. Stop what? You're looking to see what the speakers are. Yeah, I know. So the friend heard this and went over to this round table that got this cloth draped over it, lifted up the cloth, and there's a pair of speakers stacked one on top of another underneath the cloth. And I looked at them, they're my speakers, they're my Infinity speakers. You can't do that with my Infinity speakers. So I felt I had to do some kind of education. I wasn't going to leave it like that.
But they were happy.
But they were they were happy until I came along.
In the end, it's like
I shamed them so they were no longer happy.
Instead of us telling them what they should be doing, they were doing what they were happy with.
Yeah.
And yes, they could be happier.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it didn't. Their experience was wonderful.
I think we need to start a new hashtag, like no hi-fi shaming.
Yes.
It's done. It's over.
So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to the audience. I think our friends here will get a microphone, and if you raise your hand, they'll run down with a mic.
Well, first, I guess I should have read the description because I was looking forward to an hour-long discussion on the future of hi-fi equipment and speakers in particular, because you had all this people. But I guess my initial reaction is I'm wondering whether you might be missing the point. Obviously, hi-fi and high-end has an issue with millennials, but I think you have an issue with pretty much every generation because the vast majority of the American public thinks that hi-fi means Bose or maybe Beats, and if they would be hard-pressed to name any other manufacturer. So one question to ask is, what is Bose and Beats doing that the rest of you aren't? They're certainly not making a better product, but they're selling it better. As far as millennials, I mean, I'm obviously well past that, but I know when I was growing up, what got me into hi-fi was you go over to a friend's house and their dad's stereo system is there, and it's a good stereo system, or you go to local Meyer Emco. I'm not sure they're around anymore. Most hi-fi chains are no longer there, and brick and mortar shops are basically dying. So and my general view is that until you've actually heard a good sounding equipment, good sounding system, you're not going to get it. So you really have, it's a real challenge for you guys. But I was wondering if you could think about more creative ways to get this stuff in front of people. I can relay one experience and get your impact. Like, I used to travel to London a lot and stay in hotels. I stayed at Savoy Hotel. They had Meridian gear there in their rooms. I went to the W Hotel, and you can laugh at Crosley, but one thing to ask is, why is Urban Outfitters selling their products and not yours? They must be doing something right by getting their stuff there. You go to the W Hotel in London, and they have an LP library, or at least they used to, and portable record players. Crosley's, they suck, but you could ask for them, and you could borrow an LP, you can borrow a record player and listen to them. Hotels are actually a great way to get your stuff in front of people, because you have just thousands of people just going in and out of hotel rooms. The other thing is on campuses. Building brand loyalty. Apple used to have really good student pricing, on campus, and they hooked an entire generation of people to their products that way. Do you ever think, or do you have any people kind of interface with colleges and try to sponsor audiophile societies at the college level and lend gear and things like that to get people kind of into this? Because until they're in, until they hear it, it's just, you can't do anything. So.
Those are very good comments, because it ties in with this idea of how you advertise, because you can't experience something from seeing an advert, and you can't understand how things can be better, because you mentioned Bose being hugely successful. Bose know how to market. They know how to set enough places up that you can go and experience it, and they target that it's sufficiently better than what anyone's listening to on a typical old radio or TV, that to them it sounds better and they've reached that audience. You don't get interested in something until you give them that experience that something is better and you realize you've been missing out. And that is difficult, because you've got to be in situations where people can experience. So the hotels and whatever, yeah,
I think
definitely.
Bose these days is primarily seen as a headphone company. Mostly due to the headphone kiosks, and they have a really great noise cancellation system. And as far as maybe we're missing the point. One of my first comments whenever there are those, where are the female audiophiles, is you guys know, most people aren't into this. And so, the segment of the male population that's into it is like this, and the segment of the female population is like this. So yeah, it's definitely a niche market. I think where the Bose of the current generation really is Sonos.
Yes.
And what they've done is what I've talked about was they market differently, and other manufacturers are starting to see that. They do go into things like hotels. Bowers and Wilkins has gone into hotels. A lot of other manufacturers have gone into hotels and done systems at least to get the name out there. I think also that dealers, because there are still really good brick and mortar dealers. Everything from one end of the being Best Buy, the other end being someplace like Hero Soundings across the street, or Listen Up, or something like that. And they are. It's a mixed bag in terms of what they're doing, but some of them are very, very good at reaching out to colleges, having things like tune up your turntable. How to get the best sound from your computer or phone, things like that. And I think it's just constantly reaching out and getting more, and to a certain extent, we're all trying to figure this out. It's a very different marketplace than what we all had 10 years ago. And so we're all learning. And so I think the more we all talk to each other and get new ideas, the better we are.
Next question.
I think you just answered all my questions and what I was going to talk about.
I'm psychic.
You're perceptive, yeah. My thought was that in my cohort, people in their 70s, none of my friends are interested in audiophile stuff. If they come and listen to my system, I'll have an evening of music. They'll love it. but they have no interest in following up with anything, whether it's vinyl, LP, CD, speakers, you name it. They just don't care. And it's the same for my 7-year-old nieces and nephews. They love music. They sing. They'll hear my system, but instead of, I'm still just that uncle, that has that system. They don't really care about following up. The music that they hear, from whatever source they hear it, is good enough for them, and they've got other things they'd rather spend time on. So I'm curious,
Yeah.
you covered a lot of it. We're saying we're still figuring it out. It's that small
Right.
group of the male population, maybe a slightly smaller of the female. It's basic things, the reaction I get. I bought a system for my father when he was 88 and had experiencing some dementia, but unlike my 5 younger brothers, he had always liked music. I mean, really liked it, sense that you and I understand. He's willing to listen to what he would call light opera, Gilbert and Sullivan or something. And so I bought some Andrew Jones Pioneer SP, whatever, that got the great stereophile review at Best Buy for $130. Put them in the near field. He wouldn't care about what a near field was on his desk. Now my youngest brother has that system that my father's passed on. His taste in music is terrible. It's all country. And there's good music in all genres, even country. But he's stunned. He can't believe how good that sounds. I bought an NAD 3020 with it. I gave him the links to Stereophile. He's probably the reviews that led me to it. He's probably never seen. He still doesn't care, and none of them care. So I'd be interested in your reaction. You were figuring it out, but like the Apple Sonos study of how music improves your life, what is it that caused someone to be interested in having some of that quality in anything, much less in their music system? How would you study that?
Well, what's interesting about that is that we're all talking about how to get new generations interested, new kinds of people interested. It's not that we're ever going to reach everybody and get everybody interested if we can give them an experience that's better, because they'll accept the experience is better, but do they value that experience all the time? And do they value it enough to pay for it, right? But we still will get some of them. And if we don't do anything, we don't get anybody, then it's the end. We'll all shuffle off the mortal coil, and there'll be a lot of hi-fi systems going into the trash. So it's not just about growing the business back into a huge part of everybody's lives, but at least let's get enough people coming along to replace us, and hopefully expand it beyond just that very small niche.
And I think constantly exposing the people in our lives. So I will say I'm very, very proud that both of my kids will bully their friends into getting Tidal subscriptions. Instead of just, and they'll do my oldest will do A/B comparisons between Spotify and Tidal for her friends to basically say look, seriously guys. So I think, and that basically comes through, they've constantly been exposed, just like I was constantly exposed, you were constantly exposed. And so even those people in our lives that sometimes it kind of seems like maybe they don't care, just, constantly showing them.
You made an interesting point there about bullying them into paying for music, because my niece has never bought a piece of music in her life. The only way she gets music is YouTube. Doesn't pay for it. If you don't care about paying for the music, why do you care about paying to hear it better? So it all ties in with this expectation of not having to pay for things.
I don't think you can write her off as not that we're going to sell your niece, but when DACs were first coming out, one thing that Peachtree taught their guys was don't yell at people for having MP3s. Tell them we're going to make it sound better. And that's the same kind of philosophy, changing our attitude, embracing them where they are. They're listening to Spotify. They're literally, I think anyone under 20 mostly gets their music off YouTube, as Kathleen mentioned. But let's not yell at them about where they get their source, because I don't want to pay for music if I don't have to.
Well, no, it wasn't so much yelling at where they get the source.
Yeah.
it's the value they attach to
place.
that. If they're not prepared to pay for something, maybe that influences what they'll do later on.
Andrew, if I can interject, that is a misconception.
Yeah.
Going back to your association with the word value, the way people of every consumer segment value music is different. The tools and methodologies of how they access music is different. It's all based on this transformation to digital, which has engulfed not just this industry, but every industry over the last 2 decades. So I think going back to your theme about the future of high-end, the key is not just high-end audio, but let's look to the best practices of other industries who have high-end products and experiences, and take the lessons learned from those and apply it in the best way possible to these new segments. Just one additional point regarding paying for value of music. Younger people, not just millennials, but Gen Zs, they pay for music all the time. The going rate of festivals is greater than ever before. The amount of clubs, concerts, merchandise, all of these various factors associated with the music experience. People pay for this because they understand the value. Our problem is we haven't conveyed the value proposition of what all these devices and all the experience these devices create provide. We need to develop the tactics and the tools to reach those younger people on their level so they can get value out of a better music experience.
Fair enough, yes.
Oh, good, this works. Didn't work yesterday. One thing I've noticed, I have my own CPA firm, and I have a system that I've had in my office for decades. One of the things that people really get a charge out is we will occasionally, after work, just pull the conference table back. People bring in wine, stuff like that. We just play music. And that's the first time a lot of these people who would be ideal customers for high-end have ever heard anything that's high-end in an environment where there's no pressure, there's no nothing. All you're doing is just, we're just going to listen to music. And the kids that I employ, they love it after 5 o'clock. Play whatever you want. It just has to be not too loud because it would disrupt everybody else in the office. But we have a good time with it, and then stuff gradually spreads. And I think one of the things, since I've been back involved in high end, it is so snobby, so closed. I really doubt that a lot of people are even interested in expanding it.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to that idea of, if everybody in this room became mentors, to other people that are, they show like a little glimmer of interest, really kind of foster that and mentor that. And honestly, things like that are really fun. I really enjoy that aspect of my job is finding that little spark.
I think the idea about having a system at the work and letting people in. There's a friend of mine in Japan. He's the CEO of a huge company, and he can afford to buy anything. So he's got this huge museum of equipment, multiple listening rooms, his house, and he even bought a condo just as a listening room. But also at his factory, he's set up listening rooms, and anyone in the company is free to come along certain times during the day and just go and listen in the listening room and play with equipment. So he's one of those people who's trying to encourage people who wouldn't normally have access to go and have fun and see how much they can enjoy it.
The difference in my case is what's in my office isn't super expensive.
Yeah.
It sounds good, but it isn't super expensive,
Right.
so you could really, no matter what, fit it into like a Georgetown townhouse I used to be in DC, and a lot of the big stuff, I don't care how good it is, it isn't going to fit,
Yeah.
just physically. And so when they see the speakers I have, I could get those in my place. And those things, that isn't too much room. I could find a place for that. And it also, like I said, it takes the pressure off of people here, we're just going to have fun. And if they like it, you help them out a bit.
Right.
Any other questions?
I think we have
Comments?
time for one more.
Yeah, you've got 2
And if
minutes.
you don't mind the camera guy.
Oh, no, that's awesome.
Well, as a millennial, I'm 29, and I'm pretty aware of what kind of marketing is actually targeting us, and I really do feel like this is an industry that we're pretty underrepresented. I can't tell you how tired I am of watching system reviews that are with like a phone and a guy talking, because what kind of person listens that is an audiophile that cares about audio quality is watching a system review of a several $1,000 system and the audio's crap, pardon my language. It's kind of aggravating for me as someone that is a viewer of this stuff and reaches that. And I really do think, like, if you're going to model yourself after an industry, and the gaming industry is a good industry to look at that is being very successful at selling high-end, high-cost products to our generation. Outside of this, I have a content marketing company. My company, I have 6 employees, and I am the oldest person of my company, and there's several of us that have $2,000, $3,000 computers at our home just for gaming, and that's a common thing. So it's not like we don't have the money to be spending on this kind of stuff. It's that the education is not targeted to our generation.
I think, and I've meant to mention this earlier, so Jana Dagadan, I don't know if anybody knows her, she was with Stereophile for a while. She just launched, and she has been the video content editor for John Darko as well. She just launched a YouTube channel. She is a millennial. Actually, I think she's a very young millennial. I think she's still in her late 20s. She's a woman. And she's done some really, really interesting things. And she has a really cool new YouTube channel where she actually has you're talking about the content being better. She actually has a head that is a recording device, and she puts the head in the spot where the speaker designer sat when they set up the speakers. And so you're actually listening to the system as the speaker designer intended. And just and she shows the measurements of the space in a really cool way, and it's one of the most innovative things I've seen lately, and it's really, really cool, I think, for it to be coming from a younger voice in the industry. Just so you're starting to see some fresh ideas and better use of that kind of medium.
I have one more comment. I think that a lot of people were probably interested in the future of hi-fi and where we're going as a community. And one of the things I've heard time and again is that we're dying as a community, and that is just not true. Like, while we are struggling to figure out how to expand our space and expand who we're talking to, there's no doubt that we're not going anywhere, and that people are still going to be passionate about hi-fi. So I just wanted to, as the forums,
And with that, our time is up.
Yes.
We're actually over. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.